On August 22, 1989, the quaint community of Fort Collins, Colorado, was rocked by the brutal killing of Susan Dahl, a beloved local resident whose life was violently cut short. Susan, 28 at the time, was found beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted in her own home. The sheer brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the town, and immediate efforts began to find her killer. Yet despite the urgency, the case would languish in darkness for years as forensic techniques struggled to keep pace with the viciousness of the act. Susan was described by friends and family as warm, community-oriented, and caring. She had recently moved into the house on Franklin Drive and, those close to her said, was making efforts to settle into the neighborhood. On the night in question, she was alone at home. When she failed to show up for work the next day, friends and colleagues became alarmed, leading the police to her residence. There, then, detectives uncovered a crime scene marked by violence, rape, strangulation, and signs of a physical struggle, even as modest personal belongings remained undisturbed. At first, the investigation uncovered little beyond the physical scene. Traditional law enforcement measures, such as interviews and neighborhood canvassing, were unable to produce viable suspects. Fingerprints found in the house offered no matches in the system, and DNA testing then in its infancy provided no immediate leads. The case slowly went cold, leaving Susan's family in mourning and devoid of closure. However, in the mid-1990s, renewed interest in the case brought new hope. Investigators located a key piece of physical evidence during a re-examination of the surviving forensic materials. A pair of Susan's underwear found hidden in the basement furnace of a nearby residence. Alongside this, detectives extracted semen and fingerprints from the material, physical traces that had been overlooked or unusable during the initial investigative phase. These new leads prompted forensic specialists to apply more advanced DNA profiling techniques emerging during the late 1990s. With the recovered evidence, they entered the state and national databases in hopes of finding a match. Finally, in 2001, the DNA hit came back to Douglas Thames, a man who had been arrested separately in Colorado on unrelated charges, notably burglary, and whose DNA profile had been recorded. Elizabeth Leslie Thames was promptly arrested and brought into custody. Authorities then connected the dots. Douglas Thames had briefly shared connections with the neighborhood and rented a local storage unit where the victim's underwear was discovered, presumably discarded after the crime. Confronted with mounting evidence, DNA, fingerprints, and physical linkage, Thames confessed, admitting that he had broken into Susan's home with the intent of burglary. He claimed the encounter escalated, and panicked, he committed the rape and murder. It was a horrific confession that stunned the community and provided long-awaited closure. At his trial in 2003, prosecutors assembled a compelling case built on credible science and Thames's own admissions. The jury heard how Susan had been stalked, overcome, and violently strangled, all of which tied directly to Thames's confession and the physical evidence linking him to the crime scene. Douglas Thames was convicted of first-degree murder in October 2003 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Colorado's reliable forensic process and his confession solidified the life sentence.